Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Danielle Pukunua. Welcome everyone, my name is Danielle, I'm Deputy Director here at the Art Gallery and Museum. So to celebrate our special exhibition, A New Era in Kingro's Chinese Market Garden Settlement, which in itself celebrates the opening of the site at Allens Road as a community heritage park. We are very lucky to have Arlene Baird here with us today to speak to you all. Arlene is a heritage consultant based in Mid Canterbury. She has over 25 years experience in the heritage sector, initially in the UK where she specialised in restoration and adaptive reuse of historic buildings, then in New Zealand where she provides heritage planning and consultancy services to individuals, businesses and local authorities. Over the past year, Arlene has also been standing in as Acting Area Manager for the Canterbury West Coast team of Heritage New Zealand, Pouhere, Taonga. Arlene has been involved with the Inking Brothers site in Ashburton since 2014, liaising with Council, Heritage New Zealand and Inking descendants, and project managing the stabilisation of the buildings and the refurbishment of the site in a way that shares its fascinating story. So I am going to hand over to Arlene, who is going to talk for, I think, around 35-40 minutes, and there will be time at the end for her to answer all of your questions. Thank you all for coming.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you all so much for joining us today. It is wonderful that we've got so many people here. I said to my husband this morning, I think there'll be maybe about 6 people would be interested in it. So this is great. Thank you so much. And there is always this joke that I constantly talk about the Inking site, regardless of who I'm speaking to. So actually to be doing a talk about it is very good indeed today. So, who am I, and why is an Irish girl talking about a Chinese settlement in New Zealand? So my name is Arlene Baird, as I've been introduced. I'm a heritage consultant, and I deal with all aspects of heritage work throughout the South Island of New Zealand. So you might realise from the accent that I am... Oh, sorry. Great, thank you. So you might realise from the accent that I'm not originally from around these parts. I was born and bred on the beautiful Emerald Isle, and I studied for 4 years at university in Bristol. I studied a planning degree there, and then after that I studied a postgraduate degree from University College Dublin in heritage conservation. I worked for about 10 years or so in the UK before moving over to New Zealand, and during that time I was dealing with the reuse and adaptation of heritage buildings, and I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to deal with a lot of really incredible properties over there. Working in the heritage sector in New Zealand is very different. There are a lot more challenges. There's a lot less funding available, and it definitely does make doing any sort of project very challenging indeed. But the end outcome always makes it worthwhile. So enough about me. Today we are here to talk about the Inking Brothers Chinese Market Garden Settlement in Ashburton. This story has so many layers, and today, instead of delving in depth into any one aspect of it, I'm going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour, which is going to touch on a little bit of the history of the people and the place. We're going to look at its heritage values and why it's important, and of course tell you a little bit about the project to stabilise the site, protect it for the future, and interpret the stories which leads to the opening of the Community Heritage Park. So, just over 100 years ago, a small group of Chinese men came to Mid Canterbury looking for somewhere to grow vegetables. The first Inking men folk came to New Zealand in 1905. They had to pay £100 per person in a poll tax just to enter the country. At that point in time, this was the equivalent of around about 1 year of a New Zealand average wage. So that was a massive amount of money that they had to pay to come into the country. It was only the menfolk. The Chinese women were not permitted into New Zealand at that point in time. So the inking men, they first settled in Gore. They established a laundry and they set up a market garden. More family from China joined them over time, sort of from 1917 onwards. And they also came to work in the market garden. So they were pretty successful at that point in time, until 1921, when a flood forced them off that piece of land. They tried higher land in that area, but it wasn't particularly successful. So at that point in time, they realized that if they wanted their business to succeed and to prosper, they needed to look for land elsewhere that was going to work for them. So they found the perfect spot right here in Ashburton, where the land was fertile, the growing conditions were good, and it was close to the township. So much of today's talk, as I go through it, is going to be very positive, and it talks about success. The success of the inking families when they first came over here, and the success of the project that we've undertaken over the past 10 years. But while it is a story of success, it is also incredibly challenging. It's a story of sacrifice, determination, perseverance, and sheer hard work. The men left their home country and their family and their friends in search of a better life for them and for their families in the future. So it's a story of leaving behind a homeland and loved ones to create that better life, of establishing a thriving community and successful business from scratch, and of making a huge contribution to the Ashburton community where they settled. So they rented the land on Allen's Road, and they rented it because Chinese in New Zealand could not purchase land at that time. So they rented the area. They started their business, they worked hard, and it grew quickly to become the largest market garden in the South Island. They grew all sorts of crops. They grew parsnips, onions, pumpkins, lettuce, peas, beans, leeks, yams, marrow, silver beet, rhubarb, spinach, turnips, pretty much you think of it, and they grew it. And they worked hard, especially in the early years when everything was done either by hand or by horse. They did long days. Most of their days were 12 plus hours, and they worked 6.5 days a week. This is Tom the horse. And there are some fantastic stories about Tom, how he knew the delivery routes off by heart, and of course the ones where he would be ploughing one day and the next day he would be able to go straight back to where he finished ploughing the day before. So he was a clever cookie. So there was a shop on the site, and as well as selling to the public from that shop, they also delivered their produce by horse and cart, and later then by trucks to businesses and individuals. So this was to the hospital, businesses in town. They also delivered way out to the country runs as well. They delivered up to Rakaia, to Methven, Mount Somers, Staveley and Hinds. Some of the best stories still relate to the trust that local people actually had in the King brothers. So if they were delivering up to the country runs and the farmers weren't in at the time, they were trusted just to go into the pantry, have a look, see what was needed, and fill it up as was appropriate. I don't think we'd be letting our countdown delivery people do that today. So from the 1940s, they then also started to deliver up to Christchurch. And that was really interesting because not only were they getting their produce a little bit further afield, but also on the return trip, they were able to bring back slightly more exotic fruits that weren't available at that time in Ashburton. So they would bring those back, put them in the shop and sell them, providing the local people with a little bit more choice of produce. So as time went on, the settlement became more than just a place to live and work. It became a bit of a hub for new immigrants who were coming from China into New Zealand. And they would come here almost in a way to learn how to live happily in New Zealand. And it also became a hub for other Chinese who were living in other parts of Canterbury. And basically they would gather at the settlement at certain times. They would come to socialise and they would come to celebrate. Many of the Chinese, when they first arrived, did not speak English. Some of them were initially taught on the site, and then quickly they became integrated into the community. So, as I mentioned, women initially were not able to come into New Zealand. This changed in the very sort of late 30s and in the 40s, and that meant that wives and children of the in-king men were actually able to travel here. So this is a picture in Allenton in 1950 of some of the in-king settlement children. There was also a story as well, I think, that the Ashburton mayor at the time would bring presents for the children at Christmas time. So one of the big features on the site is the Chinese pig oven. And it is thought to be one of the only remaining intact pig ovens in Australasia. So this would be used for particular celebrations. So it might be weddings, Christmas, and also a baby's 1 month celebration, as many babies didn't last beyond that. And so that was a celebration. And the pig oven would be cracked open and a feast would be had on the settlement. So basically a fire would be lit, and when the bricks inside the pig oven were white hot, then the ashes would be removed and the pig would be lowered down in. So the pig in advance would have been prepared and it would have been marinated, and then it would have been all strung up again to ensure that it didn't fall apart when it was lowered down into the pig oven. So there's all sorts of stories of just how delicious the pork was, and of all the kids queuing up for a little bit of crackling and pork bone as well. And if you are looking for a recipe for the perfect pork, then it is actually on one of the interpretation boards on the site, and it is Yep's recipe for the perfect pork. So then in 1947, the King Brothers Fruit and Vegetable Shop opened in Burnett Street. This was, you know, the settlement was expanding, their business was expanding, and this gave them access to just a greater a number of people that had access to the shop. The produce was displayed in the same way as they had been displaying it on the shop on the Allens Road site. And it was in sort of the old banana boxes and things like that. And this shop on Burnett Street, it continued to operate long after the settlement closed. So, the project. Now, the market garden business on Allens Road, it ceased operations in 1964. Following which the site was used mainly just for storage by local businesses, and gradually the buildings fell into a state of disrepair. Now, this man has a lot to answer for. This is Yep Ng, and really it was his determination, his energy, and his dedication that brought this whole project to life. In 2008, Yep approached the council asking them to help save the buildings. Now, unfortunately, there was a really complex ownership at the time. Basically, there were 5 title proprietors, but they were all deceased, and there was no clear will or succession plan. And so pretty much what that meant was that there were a huge number of descendants of those original proprietors who potentially had some link or legal right to the land. So council wanted to help, but they were concerned about the complexity of it. So Yep took it upon himself over the next 5 years to contact a number of the descendants, and he eventually obtained 33 signatures, which the council accepted as being a good proportion of the people who had a legal right to the ownership. And so basically what was set up at that point in time was a memorandum of understanding, which confirmed that although the land was still in the ownership of the In-King descendants, the council was going to take a stewardship role.
Excuse me, I'm just going to move the mic a little closer.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, all right. Yes, so they set up a memorandum of understanding. So basically, the site was still owned by the In-King descendants, but the council was going to take on a stewardship role, which meant that they would look after the buildings and they would maintain the site as a reserve. Now, fair to say, the site was in a pretty bad state when we started. And this is not even one of the worst pictures either. So basically the project, what we decided we needed to do was to protect the heritage buildings. We wanted to stabilise them. We didn't want them to be new and shiny and pretty. We just wanted them to retain their historic charm, but we wanted them to be stable so that they were not going to continue deteriorating the way it had been. And then also we wanted to capture the stories of the families and the stories of how they came to be here. So the project had a lot of elements to it. Now, the descendants did not have the funds and the expertise to undertake the project, and they realised that they needed help. Now, when we started to look back, we realised that the original Chinese settlers understood that by working together, they could achieve much more than they ever could individually. So 100 years later, when we were doing this project, it was the exact same collaborative approach that enabled us to succeed. So the collaboration was between Ashburton District Council, Heritage New Zealand Pouhere Taonga, the Chinese Poll Tax Trust, the descendants of the original settlers, and many, many other organisations and individuals that became involved over the years. So that collaboration enabled us to source funding. It enabled us to pull in knowledge and expertise and to work together to protect both the tangible and the intangible values of this special place. So the project has achieved national heritage protection. It has established extraordinary stakeholder relationships, and also it has generated understanding and appreciation throughout the wider community. So just to give you a little bit of context, this is the site. It's 2.3 hectares of land, and obviously you can see the buildings are right there in the middle. Now, interestingly enough, even when I started in with this project 10 years ago, the site sat in a rural area. It actually had rural land on all sides of it. And obviously, as you can see today, it is built up with subdivisions on all sides. So quite possibly the complex ownership that this site had has actually saved it from subdivision, which I think probably would have happened if that hadn't been the case. So just to give you a wee bit of context here as well with the buildings. So some buildings had already been lost by the time the project started, and they had either been lost sort of quite some time ago, or there was some of them that we knew had to be demolished when we started because they were unsalvageable. So what we've got here, the ones that are in white are the ones that have already been lost, and all of the coloured buildings are what remains on the site. So number 1 was the old sheds and garages. Number 2 in pink was the shop. Number 3 was a laundry building. Number 4 was mixed use. It had a workshop up at the top end of it, and that was also used as a schoolroom, and then it had food storage down below. Number 5 was multi-purpose as well. It had the kitchen, and it also had the living sitting area, and the little box bit in the middle of it was an office. Number 6 and 7 down there, they were sleeping accommodation. And then number 8 to the right-hand side was a laundry as well. So there was more sleeping accommodation to the back there as well. So the buildings were pretty much just constructed as and when they were needed. And the Inkings used whatever materials they had available to them at the time. I have to say they had some pretty interesting cladding techniques as well, such as flattening out old oil cans to line the walls, which was probably a really good way to keep out the water, but I'm not so sure about fire resistance. Anyway, so the project started with us assessing the heritage significance of the buildings. Then we identified whatever works needed to be done. Then we started and obtained building consents and resource consents to be allowed to do it. And then we had to start the fundraising to cover these works. And the desired result all the way along was to stabilise the buildings so that we could ensure their future. So the shop was one of the main buildings on the site, one of the most important buildings, I suppose, and that's because it was the hub of their business. It was also important as well because that is where people from the community would go to purchase their vegetables, and so a lot of people knew about it. Unfortunately, the shop was the one building that bore the brunt of a storm in 2018, which pretty much just ripped its roof off, and then the side walls came down. In heritage terms, we talk about stabilisations being honest, which means that you don't replicate things, that you just work with what is there. But in this instance, because the shop was so crucial to the site and to the context of the buildings on the site, the decision was made to actually rebuild it using some salvage materials where possible, but it was mostly with new materials. So our builders were Joseph Builders, who I have to say were absolutely amazing throughout this whole project. They approached it with this conservation mindset, and even though they raised their eyebrows a number of times when we had to suggest conservation-based methodologies, they happily went with it, so they were fantastic. So, so this was the building that was basically reconstructed in full. And I can say that it is sturdier now than it has ever been in the past. We did manage to save some of the shelves. One of the walls was completely saved, and we saved some of the shelves as well. So the work on the stabilisation work around the site took different methods for different buildings. So the little cute building at the front of the site beside the road, it had started to sink. There had been a lot of flooding to the back of the site, and the rear of this building had started to sink. So We took the approach here of lifting the whole building, of putting down new piles. This was after the drainage had been sorted to ensure that it wasn't going to flood again. Lifted the building, put down new piles, and then lowered it back down onto the new piles so that it was nice and sturdy. Some of the other buildings had a fairly interesting methodology for their roofs. So the main set of buildings through the middle of the site, their roofs were really quite bad and very leaky. So what we did was that we took off all of the old iron. We fixed and mended and replaced whatever timbers we needed to in the roof. And then we covered it with galvanized steel that was completely watertight. And then we put on the old tin back on top. So when you look at it at the moment and you think, oh, that roof doesn't look very good, actually it's very good. It's very good, yes. So it goes back to what I said before. We didn't want the buildings to be shiny and new. If we had shiny silver roofing on here, it just wouldn't be right. So we wanted to keep the age, but we wanted it to be nice and stable and waterproof. So the pig oven is also another one of the most important heritage items on the site. So this was restored in 2013 with funds from the Chinese Poll Tax Trust. The Chinese Poll Tax Trust have been incredibly supportive throughout this whole process, and they have provided us with 3 different sections of funding over the past 10 years, which has been amazing. Unfortunately, it's not quite to the stage that you can lower a pig down into it, but at least it's not deteriorating any further. Now, it wasn't all good news. We had a late night visitor one night who decided to come and share their artistic skills on the insides of the buildings. This was quite devastating for us. It was actually just shortly after we'd put up the security fencing, and they let themselves in and they did this. Some of what you see is more artistic than others. The bits that were on the metal or on the concrete were not such a big deal. We were able to remove those quite easily. But with wood, the patina of age is very important as buildings get older. And so actually stripping wood to remove paint, it can be quite damaging. So we are working slowly to remove all of this artistic work that they had done. On the plus side, I'm sure that the artists will be very pleased that through this talk their work has finally made it into the Ashburton Art Gallery. So, as I say, the project has been all about collaboration, and this has been a lot of fun. We had 3 working bees when everybody got down and dirty and actually did a lot of work on the site. So pretty much we had Ashburton District Council employees, Heritage New Zealand, Pouhere Taonga employees. We had a lot of the descendants that all came. And also Resine, who were fantastic. Resine actually provided, free of charge, provided all of the paint, stain and oil to do all of the buildings. So that's how they provided their sponsorship, which was just amazing. And the Resine technical advisor even came and helped us on the day as well. So that was really good. As well as being sort of a lot of fun and getting the job done, I think what the working bees also did was it gave everyone real investment in the actual buildings. So people can now say, oh, this was my bit of wall that I painted, or that I put the oil on, and that kind of makes a difference as well. And we always have food. There's always food. Anything we do, there's always food. So once the buildings were looking good, then we had to start thinking about the groundworks that were needed throughout the site. So because it's an archaeological site, everything that was done had to be done under an archaeological authority, and we had to have an archaeologist there for a lot of the works as well. So again, it was very important for us to use the right contractors, people who actually understood how important the site was and understood the processes